And we're back after a long hiatus. How are
Very
you?
long. How
Very
long has it
long.
been?
We did one in November, so that would be 4 months.
Wow.
4 months.
So of the 6 listeners that we have, we probably lost 4 of them. Back to our moms again.
I was gonna say a couple people have been like, where are the episodes?"
Yeah. I've had a couple people ask me, "Are you guys gonna do any more recording?" And I'm like, "I didn't even know you listened."
Yeah, yeah.
I was surprised. Like one guy asked me, I was like, "I would have never imagined you to be listening to a podcast
That you and I do.
that you and I do." Yeah.
Well, they're probably coming for me. Let's be real.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's been a long time, but I'm excited to get back into it.
I was telling you that when you contacted me and said, "Okay, let's do it this week," I kinda got butterflies in my stomach, like, "Oh, wow." It's like
Kind of falling out of habit.
yeah, kinda lost my confidence.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about on the bright side, it is just talking, which you and I have no problem with, which some people probably have a problem with, whoever you are that listens. I don't even you know the irony? Here I am. Here we go. I don't think that the people care. The people that are complaining about the time limit, I don't even think they listen.
That's probably true.
And I'm like, well, why do you care then? So
Well,
they don't even listen to half.
they're saying I don't listen because it's too long,
Well, listen to half and then stop.
then stop.
Yeah.
Now, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but you do.
Yeah.
Do you listen all at one time, or do you listen in segments as you have, like, time in the car or round and about?
I mean, it kind of depends. Like, um, if I have to stop something, I will, but I'll just start it again. But like,
Do you start from the beginning again, or do you just pick it up where you left
no, I
off?
pick it up where I left off.
Okay,
Now, how much I actually soak in,
yeah,
but I mean, a lot of podcasts, I mean, there's like, only a percentage of it that's really good. I mean, all of it's okay, but there's only gonna be a couple things that you remember. But like, I will just start and stop stuff. Like, I just was listening to a 3 hour long Joe Rogan. So,
3 hours, wow.
and
Yeah,
then
I
next up on
don't
my docket is a 4 hour long Israel Palestine debate. So that'll be a long one,
wow, good for you.
I
I
guess.
have such a short commute between my house and work, and other than, quick out and about to go to lunch or something, I don't really spend a lot of time in the car that I would be, and I always associate listening to podcasts to time driving in the car for some
Mm.
reason. I wouldn't normally sit around at my house or in my office and listen, and I can't listen to one while I'm trying to do something else. Otherwise, it literally I hear nothing.
Hmm. Like, whenever I'm doing, like, yard work or something, we've talked about this before, but whenever I'm doing, like, yard work or something, my mind isn't focused on what I'm doing because it's
Right?
just running on auto. I'm just going back and forth the mower
Yeah.
or, walking with so I can listen to it then. But yeah, I mean, sometimes even, like, instead of watching we were just talking about if we watch TV, instead of watching TV show, I'll, like, watch a podcast.
Okay.
Yeah. But I also watch, whereas a lot of people just listen.
Yeah.
Um, which is probably the difference between a lot of people. I think I don't know, I guess. I only ever watch. I don't like it when podcasts are only audio.
Okay.
I like to see
Interesting.
them, which is
Yeah.
why I was so big on making this, um, have cameras on this was because I prefer it that way, and I feel like a lot
You
of
weren't
people do.
even interested in listening to your own podcast.
I was gonna listen. No.
Well,
Though I'm gonna be it's even I didn't even go back and listen to my sermon, which I know you do every single Sunday. Like,
yeah,
I didn't listen to the
you
full thing,
you didn't.
yeah,
Wow. I
which
have
I probably should,
I need to
but
mentor you better then.
yeah. About going back and grading myself for, being critical, but, no, I don't like listening to me talk. I don't sound like I should
No, well, neither do I. I sound like Donald Duck, so
Yeah, and so I don't like it, so
huh, interesting.
and also just kinda like being done with whatever it was I was just doing.
Yeah, I don't know. I for years have always gone back and listened, and it's part critique and part reassurance that it wasn't as bad as I imagined it.
Sometimes if I'm ever afraid yeah, like, if I'm afraid I said something a certain way, I'll go back to make sure I did or didn't.
And sometimes I listen back and I'm like, "Oh no, I can't believe." Like a couple weeks ago, I was talking about sovereignty, and I said there's only 7 true sovereign governments. I said in the United States. I meant the world.
Mhm.
So I went on to say, but they're primarily located in Asia and Africa. So I think the listener would make the interpretation, oh, he meant the world, but I said 7 sovereign
Governments
places
in
in the
America.
United States.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
so I catch little things like that, worry about, do we need to edit that? Do we need to go back and change that? But most of the time I decide not
In your
to.
message?
Yeah.
If you need to edit it on the
Or like
production side,
so
or if I need to edit it?
so in that case we would I might have said, "Hey, let's go with the other
Oh,
service,"
oh, oh,
because I
okay.
didn't make that mistake, but I don't listen to both services. I'll just listen to one that I think went the best
Yeah. Sure, yeah, it was,
to verify that it's the one I want posted for public.
like, I knew after doing my like, I just had a feeling about
Yeah,
one more than the
and I
other.
always do.
Yeah,
And for years, it was always the second service that I felt better about, but
that's what I
now
was.
for the long time, it's been the first service.
Honestly, if granted, I've only given 1 sermon, so I'm acting like I can add to this conversation. But, like, if I hadn't fumbled on I was just trying to make a joke in the very beginning. If I hadn't fumbled on that, I might have posted the first because Allie says that I ended it better with that time.
He fumbled the joke.
Yeah, I fumbled the stupid joke. And it was and then I think it was just about, like it was like a dig on myself
Yeah,
is all it was. And so I was just like, "You know, hang on, never mind. It doesn't matter."
yeah, that hurts when you especially in a live audience.
You just gotta own it, though. Owning it makes them laugh, and
Oh, yeah,
everybody's like,
yeah.
"Oh, thank God."
Yes,
But
if
if
you
you
own
don't
it.
and you just like, "Ooh," then everybody's like, "Oh God, this is gonna be
Yeah,
a long 30 minutes."
own your bad jokes, own anytime you butcher a sentence or say a word wrong, just go back and go, "Oh, whatever that was," and then correct it. People find you much more authentic and
Yeah,
approachable.
because if not, you just leave it in that uncomfortable zone.
Yeah, and
And
they're
so you can
like,
just feel everybody like, "Oh, thank you."
yeah,
I
exactly.
thought we were just gonna not address what just
And
happened.
I actually find it as it's a way to ingratiate or
Yeah.
endear yourself to your audience,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
showing that you're normal and mess things up.
It made me feel less nervous after,
And
because then I was like, "Oh,
sometimes,
well, I already messed up." It doesn't, you know?
very rarely, depends on when it happens in the message, but sometimes, I'm on stage and there's lights. Sometimes I can see a little spit come flying out of my mouth. And I'm always like, Did they see that like I did?" And so then I debate whether I should address
Nope, no one saw it.
that. But
Maybe if they were sitting on the very edge, they could, like, see the little
yeah, but I'm always like, "No, I'm at a place in the message where to interrupt it would not be good." So I don't, but I'm always like, "Did they see that like I saw that?"
and I don't if I whenever I get to sit in the audience, I normally sit front row, so I can tell you no one has seen it.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. That's
So
good
you're
to know.
good. Yeah, so you're good. I like sitting front row because then I know I can make eye contact with you whenever you're up there.
Just get in my head.
Just a little bit, I guess, or if you ma it's really for if you make the occasional joke, I can be like,
Let me know that didn't
"Nope,
work.
didn't work." People are laughing, but it's just because 'cause they're being nice.
I think one of the worst occasions was the first week of our online services in lieu of in-house services during COVID.
Yeah.
I set up this great big joke to sort of, you know, ingratiate myself to this new audience that was all at home and didn't even stop to realize I was the only person other than the production team that was in the
No one can
auditorium,
laugh.
and there was nothing. It was just crickets. And so I was like, I had nothing to feed off of. I didn't know if the joke worked. It was miserable.
It's whenever you just kinda like right at the end of the joke, you lean in, you go, "Huh?
Huh?
You like that, guys?"
Anybody? Somebody.
Comment, "Ha ha," if you liked it.
Exactly.
Oh, unreal. Yeah, the COVID online days, that was something.
So we're back in the saddle,
We
ready
are.
to start doing some more podcasts and you have a topic for us today.
Yes, I just thought that it'd be good, given that we're just coming back. We haven't been in for 4 months. What I wanna talk about is just that world seems like it's getting a little crazy. I feel like everybody kind of feels it, especially, I think, primarily with it being an election year and all
Yeah.
everything going on. Um, but just how to stay grounded in seemingly crazy world. It's kind of what we'll be talking about
Okay.
today. So to just kinda start off with, do you agree? Do you feel like the world's kinda crazy? Or is there anything crazy that you see going on?
Well, it's interesting that you use those words, and I don't think that you and I have had a conversation about this, but it seems like in the last 2 weeks, I've had several conversations where either I or somebody said, "This is a really crazy world."
Mhm.
So, I don't think it's just unique to you. I think there are a lot of people feeling like, is our world coming completely unglued? Because they're seeing so much radical change, upheaval, um, more and more disturbing news, more and more disturbing movements in culture, society, certainly in our nation, that I think people are kind of scratching their head like, what in the world's going on? And I think you're right also, and that you mentioned it's an election year, and that always brings out the crazy because you have this really intense ideological battle that's being fought in the public marketplace,
Yep.
public square, two political parties, literally bludgeoning each other over issues, and that's all, brought up, raised to a level of visibility. It just seems to consume the conversation. And I don't, I guess I'd be saying this for me. I wouldn't necessarily say that everybody's going to make the same equation. But if you just look at our last election, it was, it was a nightmare
Mhm.
of all that went on around it,
Yep.
from, questions about the voting, the count of the votes, to Antifa and a host of other, riots and
January 6th.
protests. January 6th. I mean,
Yep.
you just look at that, what, 4 years ago. And I don't think it'd be unreasonable to think, man, this go around could be just as crazy, if not crazier.
Well, and we have the same 2 candidate
Yeah.
ca for now, we have the same
Shaping up
2
to be the
candidates.
same two candidates.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that there's kind of a general feeling of sort of a instability and an upheaval kind of culturally. I talk to a lot of people that have kids, and they're saying things like, and the stuff my kids are hearing,
Yep.
seeing, learning, how in the world do I navigate this? Um, just the kids are in conversations about stuff that you probably weren't in conversations about much when you were in high school. They weren't even on the radar when I was in high school.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I don't think it's unfair to kind of portray it seems a little crazy.
Yep. Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I mean, and that was kinda the entire point. I was hoping that it wasn't just me, that was feeling that way, and I know a lot of people just get, um, I guess, confused on what to do, particularly with the church. I think that there's a lot of things going on with the church right now, or things being levied at the church right now, and putting Christians in a lot of, like, weird positions.
Oh, yeah.
From everything from, which is just another podcast topic that I wanna do, Christian nationalism. All you're hearing a lot about this,
Yeah.
and I don't really know what it is. No one's saying what it is other than just, like, I'm pretty sure I would fall in that bucket if there was a definition given.
Well, it's interesting you brought that up because that's mentioned in this Sunday's message.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
And basically, here's how it's getting framed in anticipation of the election
Yeah,
season.
yeah,
So we can call it gaslighting. They're turning up the gaslighting.
mhm,
But basically, it's this: any conservative with a patriotic feeling about the welfare of our nation is going to be portrayed as a Christian nationalist, and they're dangerous.
Yeah, yeah.
They're they're extremists. That's how that's going to be portrayed. And so I'm already seeing the rhetoric. There was a classic example on MSNBC just 2 or 3 weeks ago where one of the reporters has this conversation about the danger of Christian nationalism, which is really just saying conservative people who are concerned about what we're seeing happening in our nation, that's going to be portrayed as vitriolic and hateful and dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's going to be used in the, I'm sure it's going to be used in the campaign cycle.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no, it's definitely setting it up for
So you
something.
just have that sort of angst, that sort of, you know, conversational turmoil that's happening across all sorts of fronts,
Mhm.
leaving people feeling weird.
Even in just, like, in relationships, like, I mean, I have relationships with people who don't think particularly like me, but then all of a sudden, it seems like there's just much more of a divide, and this is not new. I mean, this has been going on for,
Yeah.
a while now, but it just seems like it's getting worse. Um, I just think that the Christian side of it is getting pulled more and more into it because again, they're specifically with love, but we talked about this to, no end, but, um, whenever we make it all about this love and acceptance, then it gets really confusing, and Christians can get really confused. So there is a lot stuff. I mean, I read the other day, here's another crazy thing going on. 1/4 of Gen Z now identifies as something in the LGBTQ plus. 1/4. That's nuts.
Yeah.
And I think
And
like
it's a recent or new trend, meaning
yeah,
it's the amount of language and the amount of influence that's perpetuating those ideas to an immature and, intellectually inexperienced age group, kids, that they're being duped into claiming certain things to be true that aren't exactly true, so we're
yeah.
watching.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, for instance, like, there's colleges where, like, I think 50% of the student population, and it's like, that can't be legitimate,
Yeah,
and so it has to just be something to do with, like, the social some kind of a social status that comes along with claiming to be
yeah.
part of said group.
So, yes, the world's in a bit of a crazy place.
Yes. So, the world's in a crazy place, but what are some things that are make you hopeful that you see happening?
What do I see that makes me hopeful? Well, if you look in the right places, you can find plenty of examples, and I'm not even talking about Christian examples. You can still find examples of really noble, inspiring, um, generous, kind, grounded sorts of gestures from one human being to the next. Um, that you hear people say kind of restores my faith in humanity because they see somebody do something that's really generous or thoughtful or protects somebody. Anytime something tragic happens nowadays, it seems like the largest group of eyewitnesses are recording it on their phone.
Mhm.
But somebody will step in to help the the person
Oh,
who's,
yeah.
being beat up or, robbed or something. There was just an example of that at the Super Bowl celebration
Yep.
in
Mhm. Yeah, that
Kansas
shooter.
City. So there's a shooting. People are most people are running. Some people are recording, and then one or two guys tackle the shooter.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing where somebody goes, restores my faith in humanity. There's still some common sense. I'm seeing that a lot. There's still some common sense out there because a lot of what you're hearing seems to betray. common sense. You're like, well, uh, uh, comes up with that idea, but you're intimidated to speak to it because it's such a hot topic. But so I think those examples are out there. It's just unfortunate that our news and our social media doesn't necessarily focus on those things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the news in particular, I honestly think that there's kind of a return to, particularly with younger people, particularly with younger men, um, at least by the stats, like, more traditional values. Granted, on the other side of that, younger women are going the complete other direction. So, like, younger women like this towards non-traditional values, younger men are like this towards more traditional values.
Yeah,
But I think that that is a huge win, and I think a lot of younger people are looking at things and being like,
yeah,
"I just kinda wanna get married, own a piece of land, and, like, have a garden." And I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty nice." Like, there's a
yeah,
lot of that coming back.
yeah.
Um,
And I'm looking at more celebrities, not certainly not by the majority, but more celebrities or more athletes, professional athletes, um, taking more definitive stance on their Christian faith,
yeah.
being a bit more vocal about it. Whereas, um, you know, the common thing right now is to so attack anybody with conservative statements as a way of bullying them into silence. So it's kind of refreshing to see a few of these voices step up and give a testimony of their faith in God or gratefulness to their savior. So again, I think that was so um it wasn't done for such a long time that you're starting to see some people say it.
I mean, even some of the, like, I listen to different podcasts and stuff, even some of, like, the world's most famous, well-known atheists are starting to kinda rethink things. They're at
Yeah.
least not clowning. They used to, like, kind of make jokes about
Yeah,
their,
yeah.
at the expense of religion, and they're not anymore. They actually are saying, like, "Yeah,
Yeah, there might be value in it.
actually see the value in why that was there. There's actually a piece of our mind that's, like, created for such things."
Mm.
Um, so that's really hopeful, for me, and I think also too, like, with all evil, the more you shine the light on it, the more it you like, you 1, you can actually address the issue, and then 2, it just starts to it doesn't like the light being on it.
Right.
And so whenever a lot of the more evil forces in our world, not necessarily the people, but the intentions, the forces in which that are moving it, get put into the light, and people can see it for what it is, then I think people are actually reacting, like parents with schools or whatever, which that type of stuff is very hopeful 'cause it's like, okay, well, when this stuff's actually revealed, it doesn't have legs to stand on.
Yeah, and you and I, we share some common interest in certain voices today. Jordan Peterson, Ben
JP?
Shapiro, Michael Knowles. It's I love watching Michael Knowles, Ben Shapiro on a campus at a campus presentation. And they both do a really good job at welcoming dissenting viewpoints. And they give, in fact, I think it's Shapiro. He says, if you don't agree with me, you get to go to the microphone first.
Yeah, it's a Daily Wire. All Daily Wire speakers have to.
Yeah. And so I've watched a couple of those examples, and it's been kind of refreshing to see somebody from a very divergent viewpoint ask them a question, sort of, pushing the party line, and then watching them respond in a very calculated, very intelligent, very rational, educated set of facts. I find that I, I find that hopeful
Yeah.
that there are people out there who are thinking well and having you know the courage to stand up to some of this craziness and speak sense to it. Um, I, I find that hopeful.
And mhm, that's the thing. I was listening to something today and they were talking about because having the courage to do that, like if you leave the crazy side, you're an enemy on the crazy side now.
Yeah.
Like you've betrayed the crazy side. But at least on the other side, one, conservatives in general will be like, "Cool, glad you came to your sense," or whatever. But, like, Christians on their hand, like, they welcome you in. For the majority of Christians would be like, "We're glad you're here."
Yep.
Like, "Awesome, we love you. This is awesome." That's what the faith's about. And you don't get that on it's not the same on the other side, and so you
Right.
are starting to see a lot more of that,
Yep.
which is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, so hopeful. Okay, so how do we stay grounded then in these crazy times, which, we've outlined some, but what everybody's feeling and probably already knows about?
I have a couple answers to that. How do you stay grounded? Um, so at Cibolo, where I pastor, we've committed to 2024 to exploring what we're calling the foundational beliefs of our Christian faith in in a theme called putting down roots. And we just spent 7 weeks talking about the sovereignty of God, which I look at as the most foundational truth of the Christian faith. The idea that God is the sovereign creator and sustainer of the universe and has all the rights and privileges thereof. And I wrapped up that series 2 weeks ago with a look at one of the verses we looked at was Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Faith is, and depending on the translation you're reading, faith is the confidence of things that we hope for, the assurance of things that we can't see. And I found myself personally struck by that. And I mean, how many times have I read, studied, and taught on that one verse? But those two words really leaped out at me personally, the words confidence and assurance. And I basically, found myself, and I'm still kind of mulling it over, is if my faith isn't providing some sort of confidence, not arrogance, but a confidence or some sort of reassurance, then I'm doing it wrong.
Mhm,
Faith is designed to be a resource for a Christ follower in the world in which they live. The things that faith being the things they believe to be true about God. And so I think one of the things that you do is you learn the difference between knowing about faith and living by faith.
mhm,
And that's where I'm pushing myself is I can see the crazy. I read enough news to go, "Oh my word, where is this headed? Um, how did we get here and why in the world are we buying this hook, line, and sinker?" I see all that stuff and I can get worked up about it. Like internally, I can get angry, I can get frustrated, I can get, really, and I don't know, worked up. And I had to kind of look at that honestly and go, that getting angry and that getting worked up, is that a demonstration of faith? And I'm sorting that out. Like, there's probably a sense of righteous anger that's legitimate, but for me to worry about it, for me to feel panicked about it, for me to um, be distraught about it is demonstrating that I'm not trusting a sovereign God with the crazy that's happening in the world.
mhm.
Not that he's responsible for the crazy, but he can protect and provide for me and others in the midst of the crazy. And
Yeah.
so that's, I mean, the last couple weeks I've really been living there personally. Like, Paul, are you living by the faith that you invite a church congregation to understand?
Yeah, that actually not necessarily going off script, but that actually brings something that I've been thinking about is, um, 'cause I'm kind of with you. I think you'd agree a lot of the things that I see and read about, not necessarily that I can go and do something about it, but it does. I mean, I would say that the anger that I feel is righteous because what I'm angry about is so unrighteous, it's not even close, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so I guess it, what responsibility do Christians have to say or do anything in the face of such things, or should they just kind of keep to themselves, um,
Yeah,
and try to be like, put some walls up?
it's a both and, it's not an either or. There's a sense to which God invites us to there's passages in the New Testament, mind your own business, essentially.
Mhm,
Just go about your work, do your thing, be faithful. And yet there's other very clear examples of be salt, be light, engage your world, be an ambassador of the kingdom of God with the gospel. And I'm not even talking about like the message of truth. That's just being kind and compassionate and engaged in helping. Um, so it's a both and that just brings us back to wisdom. Like a wise person's able to distinguish and discern. Is this a time when I speak up,
yeah,
or is this a time that I just be quiet?
yeah,
Is this a time that I get involved, or is this a time I just stay unengaged?
yeah,
And it's I'm not saying that's an easy line to um, always figure out how to navigate, but that's the challenge of wisdom is wrestling with those things and coming to grips with um, how involved do I become.
yeah,
So it's not a don't group up in a little holy huddle and insulate yourself from your world. I don't think that's the answer because then the kingdom isn't being a seed that's being cast and growing into something. But at the same time, learning that you can't cast pearls to swine. I mean, Jesus taught that. So taking what may be very valuable truths and trying to um, impress it upon people who just aren't listening, who are so rebellious and resistant to the ideas of God's truth that they're not going to give you they're not even going to give you an equal opportunity to speak into it. And we're seeing this kind of in the national scene, the social scene, whereas all viewpoints are welcome unless they're conservative viewpoints.
yeah,
And then those are getting squashed and those are getting canceled. Those are being intimidated into, silence. And it's how do I distinguish between being confident and courageous to speak against the tide and at what point am I just being foolish? I mean, that's the thing you kick around. I kick around. I have a platform every Sunday morning to speak to life and the world in which we live. And there's times I go, man, if I go there, I'm going to open up that can of worms or I'm going to be perceived this way. And so maybe I shouldn't go there, but I have to figure out, am I now abdicating my responsibility of speaking truth to the situations that we face? Or am I just being kind of reckless and arrogant and forging ahead? That's the dilemma that I face of just trying to figure out, do I say something? Do I not say something?
yeah, yeah. Because I definitely don't think that we should, just segregate ourselves from society, for instance. However, I do think that not everyone's an evangelist, I
No.
guess. And I think that, for a lot of people, it would do them good to, me and Allie do it, for instance. We don't have, like, a checklist that we vet friends with, okay?
Right.
However, we know, like, who are we gonna want who what kind of people do we want to, like, I feel completely safe sending my kids over there and me and Allie going somewhere with the weekend
Yeah.
for the weekend. Like who do I know also loves Jesus and has the same value set? I think that's super important.
Yeah.
We're told not necessarily to have such discriminations. That is discrimination, and discrimination's an okay thing, and I think a lot of times a good thing if done the right way, just not on stupid things like race. Um,
Yeah, see, I wouldn't call that's not an example in my mind of discrimination. That's an example of discernment.
yes,
You're being discerning about the welfare of things that are important to you, and,
I
you know,
then discriminate against other things
what are
though.
you willing to risk?
That's the glass half full version of it.
Right. Now, for me, I look at a little I just have a different experience with it. I don't look at it differently, but, I just find that certain perspectives and opinions and lifestyles are so antithetical to things I value and cherish that to be in that company for a long time kind of wears me out because
Yeah.
you have to be guarded in what you can talk about,
Yes.
and you don't want to go places in the discussion where it could turn ugly, and so you don't really relax and you don't really feel safe and trusting. Whereas I can sit down with somebody else who I share this kinda mutual set of values and beliefs to where I don't have to be guarded, or I don't find it to be draining of energy, it's giving of energy.
Yeah.
So, I find myself kinda navigating some of the places I go and some of the people I hang out with, not because of anything to do with, um, how they believe, it's just that is it gonna be a life-giving kind of exchange? And I just may be at a place where I'm exhausted emotionally and I can't afford, you know, that kind of experience in the moment.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I completely know when you have yeah, the exhaustion part I completely understand. Um, so yeah, I completely agree with you. But I do think that just recognizing the thing like, I think that it's, really good for Christians, particularly now in this day and age, to, find other people that are like them and to spend time together, that is life-giving and wholesome and
Yeah.
and loving and trusting and, um
And again, it's a balance. And I'm not
yeah,
saying a 50-50 balance, but I spend time with certain people of shared values and beliefs because it is life giving. But as a witness of the gospel and an
yeah,
ambassador of Christ, I I can purposefully pursue other relationships
yeah,
with the hopes of, you know, demonstrating the love of Christ and maybe the opportunity to share the message of Jesus or just to enjoy the relationship, knowing that it may not be as life-giving and fulfilling and energizing because of the tense moral, delicacy of it all.
yeah. I completely
Did
agree.
that make sense?
Yeah. Only reason I'm honing in on the other part is just because I feel like the message has been so much the other way for a very long time that we've almost forgotten, like, "Hey, it is actually okay to, like, have your in group of your values,"
Yes.
which I think is what the I do think that's what the church is supposed to
Sure.
be for.
Absolutely.
Um, and so it's not necessarily just for the outsider. Like Christ tells the disciples that the world will know because of your love for one another, meaning the disciples' love for one another.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think sometimes we forget that. Um, so,
Yeah.
but that's just my 2 cents. So I think that too, and then I also think the other stuff, like if everything is making you crazy, well, then stop consuming everything.
Yes. And, I was thinking about you had told me what our topic was today. I had a few minutes to think about it. Um, I'm not gonna be able to give you the quote or the facts of what this person was saying, but essentially the message was the human mind, the human brain, and the human body wasn't really equipped to process as much information, news, and feelings that it's asked to process in an age where everything's literally at our fingertips by way of information. And so you look at 24/7 news cycles, you look at social media, look at a phone that we literally carry in our hand most anytime our hand is free. And we're taking in all this information. And in much of the information, it's global. Like I'm
Yeah.
seeing awful things happening on the other side of the world right here in my home or in my car or whatever. And the person who was this reel that I was watching, video I was watching, they were saying there's so much coming into our minds. Our minds weren't equipped to handle that much stress, that much tension, that much pain. And so, the advice was you got to learn to turn some of that off.
Yeah.
You just can't own every injustice. You can't own every tragedy. You can't own every bit of chaos all the time. You'll just literally wear yourself out.
Well, and trying to have an opinion on everything. Like, one, you can try to have an opinion on everything. Your opinion will be ill-informed simply, just based off the fact that you're trying to have an opinion on too many things.
Yeah.
So you're going to be uneducated on things. Like, you're not gonna know enough. So
Yeah.
then you're just gonna have kind of a dumb opinion on something, or just what everybody else is saying.
Right.
And so you just get sucked in. Yeah, like, just trying to turn things. I mean, okay, granted, I'm probably one of the worst because 'cause I'm constantly listening to stuff.
Right.
I don't but I also don't post anything, and I have really good conversations with people, so I don't the only detriment that I'm seeing is on my personal self of just I need to be in silence more. So it's probably hurting my own spiritual life more than it is anything else just because
Right.
everything's too loud. It's not affecting how I treat other people necessarily. At least I don't notice it. But just stop listening to everything all the time, um, and I don't know, go outside for a walk in silence. Which is hard.
It's funny you say it's hard for me. That's just
Yep.
my happy place. I
Well, I'd
I
say it's
can
kinda
be
hard for most
silent.
people.
Um,
I do it.
I like alone. I like silence. I like being disengaged. Maybe because the other parts of my life are can be rather intense.
Mhm.
Feel things deeply, listen to hard stuff, wrestle with difficult things. So then to get away from that and not be engaged is life-giving to me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree.
So I think the amount of information, amount of news that we traffic in is has to be changed in order for us to survive the crazy. Because otherwise, we're just getting sucked into it all the time, deeper and deeper. And it creates upheaval inside of us. And to always be in that spin of that upheaval, I think, is bad for our soul.
Yep.
Um, one of the other notes I made is, and I'll just say it and we can edit it, but it's
Mm.
basically quit taking ourselves so seriously and quit taking everything around us so seriously. And I'm not talking about a complete naivete or dismissal of serious stuff. I'm just saying recognizing your limits. I just can't change everything. I can't influence everything. I can't control everything. So sometimes you just got to step back and laugh and enjoy and appreciate that you're alive.
Yeah. What's an example of what you're talking about?
Um,
I don't see any reason why that would have to be edited out.
no, edited. I didn't want it to sound like being cavalier
Oh, 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 oh,
or,
oh.
everything's funny because everything's not funny. but finding space in your life to step back and go, "Okay, I'm one of, what, 8 billion people. God's sovereign. I'm just a little piece of the puzzle. I got a wonderful wife and family. I got my health. It's a beautiful day outside. My dog's awesome. My car works. I got money to, you know, enjoy some things." So learn to relax in some of the great gifts of just simplicity.
Yeah, just being grateful for what
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
that you do have.
Um, it's it's interesting. So I had a season where I was really wrapped up in the turmoil of all of the crazy. I'm really involved in trying to address it and speak to it, and I think the one of the long-term damages of that is I wasn't finding the time to be grateful or the time to just live or the time to just enjoy, 'cause I was always worked up. So when I intentionally drew some boundaries and pulled myself out of that and didn't feel like I needed to comment on it all or, have a position, and then started working more intentionally on being grateful or being, um, appreciative and really taking in birds and the sun, green grass, and really starting to get back to some of the simple pleasures of life.
Yeah.
Um, I found that to be a wonderful change, but that takes work. The crazy can be so seductive and so sinister in all the ways that it can, get into our world and into our mind, that if you're not careful, you'll just be in it 24/7.
Yeah.
You wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it.
Yeah.
So the way I'm saying it is we just need to take ourselves a little less serious and recognize that I can affect some things, I can't affect others. And
Yeah.
some things are just beyond my control, and some things it wouldn't matter how I voted or how much I stood up and protested. It's not going to change.
Yeah.
So living in some sort of, um, endless cycle of protest just isn't healthy.
Yeah, especially if the way that one is protesting is, like, purely on social media. Like, if you're arguing in the comments of a Facebook post,
Yeah, it's like,
reevaluate things because you're not doing anything. You're just getting fired up.
yeah,
Like, that's everybody's always so because you know me, I don't necessarily shy away from telling something my opinion. And I have lots to say on things, but I don't post. I've never posted anything political on social media just because I it, my immediate response to someone would be like, "Here's my phone number. You can give me a call," but I'm not talking to you on this.
well, the sick side of me is I used to post things that were, thought provoking, provocative, and then I would just sit back and watch the arguments unfold. And I had no interest in engaging. I had no interest in posting
Yeah,
any
so you're
response.
just throwing a grenade and
I
just
was throwing
watching.
it in, just watching, and I seriously, I have at the time, I'm no longer on Facebook, but I had 5 or 6 friends in my circle that I'm like, "Okay, give him a minute. There he goes. Boom."
Yep,
And then I'd be like, "Give him a couple more. Oh, there he is. Boom." And they're just
right
so
on cue.
predictable, they just and I would be like, "Yeah, I know what he's gonna say to this. There, sure it is." And even that was creates turmoil. So I decided, "Paul, seriously, grow up."
Well, the reason that creates turmoil, because this I know this would happen. You probably said something, somebody reacted to it, but they omitted, like, 30% of what you said, so, like and so you're just sitting there like, "That did you not read that part, though?"
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and again, at the end of the day, Facebook is nothing. It
No.
it it provides no intelligent forum to make lasting change. It
Uh-uh.
doesn't. everybody's so dug in that all they're going to do is voice their opinion and then dig in and defend it.
You also can't
You're not gonna talk somebody out of
no,
their position on Facebook.
you
You
can't
just
you can't quote unquote "win"
no.
from behind a
There's
keyboard.
no,
No one will ever concede defeat.
no,
Now in person, you can get somewhere.
perhaps,
Not necessarily like you're
but
just beating them down, but like you can actually have a conversation. And if somebody like if I don't know something and somebody like I've been caught on something I didn't know.
yeah,
And so then I'm like, I didn't know that. Like
yeah,
I need to reevaluate my position.
yeah.
But on social media,
Yeah,
you
but
don't
you
get
you
that.
don't get you don't get the little dopamine rush of approval at a coffee conversation in a restaurant that you do on Facebook where people are liking, disliking, blah, blah, blah. You don't get that.
I've never had that drug. So I don't know. All I know is that the drug of winning in person is pretty great.
Yeah,
Winning, quote unquote.
right. So, again, going back to how do we navigate the crazy without being crazy? I would say step back and look at who you are in the grand scheme of things and trust a sovereign God, and then do what you can and also don't take responsibility for what you can't.
Yeah. I think one more thing that I was thinking of is this is what I love about kind of the entire purpose of this year in your teaching is just to kind of try to figure out some of the fundamentals
Yeah,
of the faith. Because like I feel like I have at least a working understanding of my fundamental beliefs. By working meaning not super in depth, but enough that it's applicable
yeah,
for most things. So I could it's very easy for me to not even necessarily have to argue with things that go against it, but just I can just say no and not allow that to come into my or my family's life.
yeah.
Or be at least aware of it. It's like understanding what you believe so that way the alarm kind of goes off much quicker whenever something tries to
Sure.
sneak in,
Yeah,
which I think a lot of the time is kind of a big part of with the church is that completely Jordan Peterson said this. He's like, no one knew that we were going to have to start like uh explaining in detail what marriage was, for instance. Like, why is it important? Justify marriage. It's like, well, we've just always assumed this is a thing that's
right.
worthwhile and holy. But now, whenever that gets asked, it's like, well, we were completely unprepared to do such
Sure.
things.
Yeah,
And so, having a working knowledge of just what you do think about stuff, everything, not everything, but like, what's your fundamental like value system?
yeah.
Super helpful.
Yeah, so, we spent those 7 weeks talking about the sovereignty of God, and then last week introduced the next foundational belief, the centrality of Jesus. And this week's message is gonna be, a really direct look at one of the most critical parts of Christian belief, that is the deity of Jesus. And many, many church-going Christians don't understand, one, how critical that is, and two, they don't understand how under attack it is. And so, a lot of church-going Christians are like, "Is it really that big a deal if Jesus was, fully God? Can't he just be a really, really super spiritual person of faith?" And I meet Christians who go, "Yeah, I'm alright with that." Do you
Well, they
know
don't
how
understand.
that's the linchpin to our entire faith as Christians?
Yeah, if what you just said, if what you said is true, his sacrifice is insufficient, and we're all in deep water.
And that's exactly part of my message this week. And so, um, yeah, a Christian nowadays, it's that much more imperative that they know their faith,
Yeah,
the foundations of their faith. So it's interesting how faith is used in the scripture. And in one sense, it's this thing I exercise. But Paul often writes, several times, he mentions the faith, like this body of truth that Christians are, fixed on as our identity, our hope, our reason. And many in the Church America, they don't know that body of truth, like in some sort of a collective, intelligent way.
Yeah.
It's just kind of random things that they've pieced together.
They also don't understand why it's important.
Yeah,
Like, why, if you don't believe that Jesus was divine, well,
yeah,
like, there's certain things that disqualify, I guess, your I would say disqualify your claim to salvation. Like, I think, probably, like, only God can tell, but, like, well, you aren't believing the thing that Christ is,
y-
you know? It's really hard to say you're a follower of Christ if you don't
right.
believe the thing that he is.
Yeah, I have a friend who, like, right there, wants to consider himself a Christian, but blatantly disagrees with one of the essential truths of atonement.
Mm,
And to try to explain, well, that's kind of a non-negotiable. I I can't, from my understanding of scripture, grant you the assurance that you are right with God if you deny that one.
yeah. Well, and, like, that concept in general of I have to align myself with a body of doctrine to say I'm a part of it rather than just coming as I am kinda scenario.
Yeah.
Um, that's so antithetical to our society now. That's
Oh,
hard.
sure. Sure.
That's a hard one for people to and we've done a podcast over, like, what we're describing right now is what you'd call open and closed hand doctrine. So closed hand
Yeah.
doctrine is like a way of understanding is like the things that you really can't there's no compromise on these. Open hand are like infant baptism. Thoughts? You know?
Thoughts?
Okay, you think one thing, I think another, but, I don't think it's gonna jeopardize salvation over it.
Yeah. But deity of Jesus? Closed hand.
That's a
Yeah.
closed hand.
Closed hand.
Trinity, closed hand.
Yeah.
Sovereignty of God, closed hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, all that to say, understanding those things.
So maybe as a way to wrap up, I think there's a wonderful opportunity or invitation for a Christ follower to be a really refreshing presence that God intended them to be
Yeah,
in a world that seems crazy. So, what is it like for a person of faith to live with a certain peace and a certain hopefulness and a certain confidence and courage and a certain kind of nobility about how they go about living their lives amidst the fray? They're just walking right through it. I think that's possible. I really do. I think it's possible for a Christ follower to have that sort of demeanor about them, not because they're naive, but because their faith rests in sovereign God who's got this under control and who's going to see us through and his redemptive plans all working out. I just need to go about my life being a good reflection of Christ in my job, loving my spouse, taking care of my kids, meeting my financial obligations, doing things that are good and right and just. I think there's a great opportunity for a really genuine embodiment of what it means to be a Christ one that could be incredibly noticeable
yeah.
in a world that seems to be kind of coming apart at the seams.
A word that I've really latched onto recently is, like, wholesome.
Mm,
It's like, do wholesome things with your friends and family, and, like, even whenever I see it, I'm like, "Yeah, like, that's so different because like, they're just like, it's a completely different world than what's like, but they're just right there. And
yeah.
so it's like this world within a world almost. So yeah, I completely agree that I think that the way that we live our lives with each other, um,
And
can be that light in the darkness, yeah.
yeah. And start small. I mean, rather than trying to change the world,
Yeah.
Start across the street to the house next door, the kind of the people closest to you. Be love there, be justice there, be hopefulness there, and quit framing your contribution in terms of national or international cultural change.
What does Peterson say? He's like, "Make your bed before you try to change the world."
Yeah.
It's like, your bedroom's a mess, so I'm not gonna listen to you on this.
Yeah, exactly. Uh,
That's so true, though, but, like, just managing lowering, zooming in, I guess, just on the more local things that are the more things that are local to you. Yeah, rather than screaming at a friend about Ukraine.
yeah, exactly. I couldn't have said that better. Yeah, should you have concerns about what's happening on that side of the globe? Sure. But at the same time, you're probably not going to be the one to alter the course of events there.
Yeah,
But that doesn't mean that there isn't other ways that you can be of help to the people closest to you.
just know enough not to get tricked, but you don't have to scream about
Yeah,
everything. Don't get taken for a ride.
right.
Well, very good.
Our first podcast in 4 months.
Yes, and we came in under time,
Under time. What is our time?
an hour and 1 minute.
That's our average.
No, our average is about hour 15,
Oh.
so we came on under.
Oh, so we're at an hour and 1 minute.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, it was good. It was good to be back.
Yeah. It's always good to sit down with my friend Wyatt.
Yes, indeed. We hope you enjoyed this presentation of Cibolo Creek Community Church. If you did, please consider supporting the ministry of our church. Your donations make a difference. To check out more resources or to share a gift, please visit us at cibolocreek.com. Thanks for listening.